The silence when I walked through the front door felt heavier than any battlefield. No balloons, no welcome home sign, just my mother on the couch, her eyes fixed on her phone. She didn't even look up when she spoke. "You made it?" she said, her voice flat, like she was confirming a grocery delivery. My father glanced over from his recliner. He studied me for a moment as if trying to remember why I seemed familiar. Then he went back to his TV. I stood there with my duffel bag, heart thudding against my ribs, 15 years away, and this was my homecoming. In that moment, I knew nothing had changed. To them, I was still the one who left, the one who failed, the disappointment they never talked about. And maybe they were right. I carried my bag down the hallway, past the photos lining the walls. Smiling faces, family vacations, Harper in her uniform. Not a single picture of me older than 18. My old bedroom door was open. Inside, boxes of white lace and gold ribbon covered every surface. My dresser was gone, replaced by stacks of wedding decorations. Harper's perfect life taking up every inch. I set my bag on the floor and felt something in my chest tighten. I wasn't angry, just empty. Like all those years I'd spent proving myself had dissolved the moment I crossed this threshold. I ended up in the garage that night on an old cot that smelled like motor oil. Through the thin walls, I heard them laughing, talking about Harper's fiancé, how proud they were. I closed my eyes and wished just once they'd ask where I'd been. Morning came cold and gray. I sat on the edge of the cot, listening to the house wake up. Dishes clinking, the low hum of the news. No one came to find me. When I finally stepped inside, my mother was setting out plates for breakfast. She glanced at me, then away like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. "You'll be at the engagement party?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. Her tone made it clear it wasn't a question. I nodded. My voice felt stuck in my throat. Harper swept in moments later, all bright smiles and effortless grace. She hugged me lightly, as if we were acquaintances. "Glad you could make it," she said. Then she turned to Mom, launching into details about the party. I stood there invisible, a ghost in my own family's kitchen. The engagement party was everything I expected. Gleaming silverware, crisp uniforms, polite laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. I stayed near the catering table, picking at a plate I didn't want. Conversations floated around me, all about Harper's career, her perfect fiancé. Every so often, someone would glance my way. Their polite smiles didn't quite hide the questions, the silent judgments. When Harper entered in her dress whites, the whole room seemed to glow. She looked every bit the golden child, the daughter who had done everything right. I felt small in my gray blouse and worn shoes, smaller than I had in years. For a moment, I thought about slipping out the back door. No one would notice. Then the front door opened, and everything changed. He walked in, wearing full military dress uniform, medals glinting across his chest. His presence pulled the air tight, made every conversation die mid-sentence. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Ramirez, the last person I ever expected to see here. His eyes swept the room, calm and sharp, until they landed on me. He stopped moving. For a heartbeat, neither of us breathed. Then in front of my entire family, he straightened. His hand rose in a crisp salute. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander." The words cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Harper's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't salute back. I just nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement. But in that moment, nothing about me was invisible anymore. Ramirez lowered his salute and stepped aside as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the room was frozen. Eyes darted between us, searching for an explanation. My father cleared his throat. He looked at me like he was seeing something he didn't recognize, maybe for the first time. Harper bent to pick up the broken glass. Her hand shook. I set my plate down, feeling a strange calm settle over me. For years, I had lived in the shadows, convinced no one would ever know what I'd done. Now, the truth had slipped into daylight, unplanned and undeniable. People started whispering, soft and frantic. I heard my name, fragments of stories they thought they knew, but I didn't say a word. I just walked outside into the cool evening air and let the quiet wrap around me like armor. I stood on the porch, breathing in the night. My hands were steady, but inside everything was unspooling. 15 years of secrecy, missions that never happened, sacrifices no one would ever read about in a headline. I thought I'd made peace with that, thought I didn't care whether my family knew. But when Ramirez spoke those words, something cracked open. A part of me still wanted to be seen, to be more than the disappointment they'd chosen to remember. The door creaked behind me. I didn't turn. Harper's voice was small, careful. "Why did he call you that?" she asked. I closed my eyes. The truth pressed against my teeth, heavy and waiting. "Because it's who I am," I whispered. "Who I've always been." Harper stepped closer, her footsteps soft on the porch boards. She sounded younger than I'd ever heard her. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. Her voice broke on the last word. I opened my eyes, staring out at the dark yard. For a moment, I thought about all the times I'd almost called, all the nights I'd wondered if disappearing was worth it. "You wouldn't have believed me," I said quietly, "and I wasn't allowed." She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, full of everything we'd never said. Finally, she touched my arm just for a second, a gesture so tentative it almost hurt. Then she turned and went back inside, leaving me alone again. But this time the loneliness felt different, like maybe it was finally starting to fade. That night, I lay awake on the cot in the garage. The hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the rafters were the only sounds. My phone buzzed once on the concrete floor, an encrypted alert I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened as I picked it up. Unauthorized access detected Operation Storm Hatch. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That file wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It was buried deeper than any record in the system. I checked the trace. The IP address glowed back at me. Harper's base computer. My hands went cold. I pictured her searching late at night, trying to find answers. She had no idea what she'd stumbled into. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of old secrets pressing down. Some truths were never meant to be uncovered. Morning came with a dull ache behind my eyes. I dressed in silence, every movement deliberate. I drove to Harper's apartment without calling first. My hands gripped the wheel so tight they hurt. When she opened the door, her face went pale. Papers were spread across her kitchen table, reports, maps, fragments of a story she didn't understand. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I was just researching." The file opened on its own. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. My voice was low, steady. "You triggered a security protocol. They'll see it as a breach." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was fear for her, for what this would set in motion. Some doors once opened can never be closed again." Harper sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she gathered the papers into a neat stack. "What happens now?" she asked. Her voice was small, like she already knew the answer. I looked at her, really looked. For so long, she'd been the perfect one, the golden child. But now she was just my sister, scared and caught in something too big to control. "They'll launch an investigation," I said. "They'll want to know why you were digging." "I was just trying to tell the stories no one talks about," she whispered. "About women who serve." I swallowed hard. Part of me felt proud of her even now, but pride wouldn't protect her. I picked up one of the reports, feeling the weight of old memories. "If they decide you're a threat," I said quietly, "they'll bury you too." Harper wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked up at me, searching for something, maybe reassurance I couldn't give. "What do we do?" she asked. I set the papers down carefully. My heart felt like it was splintering in my chest. "We tell the truth," I said. The words tasted foreign. I'd spent so many years hiding behind silence. Her breath caught. "You'll go public," I nodded once. "If I don't, they'll erase everything. The mission, my team, you." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of her refrigerator. "I never wanted you to carry this alone," she whispered. I almost smiled. "Neither did I said softly. I left her apartment as the sun was coming up. The streets were empty, washed in that pale morning light that made everything look honest. My phone vibrated again. A message from an old contact at the Pentagon. One sentence. Hearing scheduled. 2 days. I stood on the sidewalk, feeling the world tilt under my feet. For 15 years, I'd been invisible by choice. A ghost no one could touch. Now I was about to stand in front of Congress and tell them everything they'd buried. I thought about my team, about the nights we spent in the dark, believing no one would ever know what we did. Maybe that was about to change. Maybe it was finally time. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. No more hiding. Back at my parents' house, the garage felt smaller than ever. I packed my uniform into a garment bag with hands that didn't quite stop shaking. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother looked up from her coffee. For once, she didn't look away. "You're leaving again?" she asked. Her voice was cautious, almost gentle. I met her gaze. "I have to testify." Her brow furrowed. "Testify about what I took a breath, about who I really am, about what I've done." She opened her mouth, then closed it. In that quiet, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: uncertainty, maybe even respect. I didn't wait for her to respond. I slung my bag over my shoulder and stepped outside. The air smelled like rain, sharp and clean. I drove toward the base in silence. The roads were nearly empty, just long stretches of asphalt and the steady rhythm of my heart. Memories came: unbidden dust storms in Syria, the press of a rifle against my shoulder, the voices of women who'd trusted me with their lives. At a stoplight, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognize the face staring back. Older, tired, but stronger too. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, feeling something settle inside me. Whatever happened next, at least I wouldn't be silent anymore. I thought of Harper, of the fear in her eyes when she realized the truth, and I promised myself this: I would not let them erase us. When I reached the base gates, the guard studied my ID longer than usual. His eyes flicked up to my face, then back to the credentials. "Welcome back, Commander," he said finally, voice low with something close to respect. It caught me off guard. I nodded and drove through, past the rows of barracks and hangars, everything both familiar and distant. Inside the administrative building, the hallways smelled the same: cleaner and stale coffee. My boots echoed on the tile as I walked toward the briefing room. I paused at the door, hand resting on the handle. My heart thudded slow and steady, like it understood this was the moment everything would shift. I drew a breath and stepped inside. No more shadows, no more secrets. The room was smaller than I expected. Just a long table, rows of chairs, a bank of recording equipment along the back wall. 3 men in suits looked up when I entered. One of them checked a file with my name across the top. "Commander," he said, nodding politely. "Thank you for coming in." I hung my garment bag over a chair and sat, my hands folded carefully in my lap so they wouldn't shake. "We're here to discuss Operation Storm Hatch," he continued, "and your involvement." His voice was smooth, practiced, like this was just another formality. But nothing about this was routine. I met his gaze without blinking. "I'll answer your questions," I said, "but you're going to hear the whole story, not just the parts you find convenient." He didn't look surprised. Maybe he'd already guessed I wouldn't play along with half-truths. "Understood," he said evenly. He clicked a pen, ready to take notes. I glanced at the recording equipment, the red light blinking steady. For a second, doubt crept in. Was I doing the right thing? But then I pictured my team. The nights we'd spent in hiding, the sacrifices no one wanted to remember. I straightened my shoulders. My voice came clear and steady. "Operation Storm Hatch began in 2011, I said. "We were deployed to northern Syria under zero identity protocols." The pen froze over the paper. One of the men shifted in his seat. I kept going. No names, no records, but we existed, and what we did mattered. I told them about the mission in pieces, how 6 of us had crossed the border under moonlight carrying everything we needed on our backs, how we spent 12 days inside a bombed-out schoolhouse, tracking money that funded attacks no one would ever trace back to their source. I didn't spare the details, the betrayals, the firefights, the night we broke every rule to bring our teammate home. One of the men cleared his throat, but I didn't stop. For 15 years, I'd held this story behind my teeth, letting it rot there. Now as the words filled the room, I felt lighter. Not free, but closer to something like it. When I paused to breathe, the silence felt electric. Finally, they knew who we really were. One of them leaned forward, his expression cautious. "You understand the sensitivity of this information," he said. "Publishing it could compromise national security." I met his eyes. My voice didn't waver. "Pretending it never happened already compromised something more important," I said. "Our integrity." He looked down at his notes, avoiding my gaze. I thought of Harper again, her hands shaking as she gathered those papers. All she'd wanted was to tell the truth about women like us. I drew a slow breath. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said quietly. I'm here because my sister is paying the price for curiosity, and because my team deserves better than a footnote no one will read. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, soft and relentless. Some truths don't stay buried forever. For a while, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain and the soft hiss of the recorder. Then the man across from me closed his file. His voice was lower when he finally answered. "Why come forward now?" he asked. After all these years, I looked at my hands, at the faint scars that never fully healed, because I'm tired of pretending, I said. Tired of letting other people define who I am. I lifted my head, meeting each of their eyes in turn. I gave everything for this country, I continued. I did it without expecting medals or recognition, but I won't let my service and the women who stood beside me be erased because it's inconvenient. Outside, the rain kept falling. It felt like a cleansing. I knew there was no turning back. The man nearest the recorder leaned back in his chair. He studied me like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. "Your testimony will be entered into the record," he said, "and you'll be called to speak before the Oversight Committee." I nodded once. My pulse thumped steady in my throat. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you understand what this means for you?" I did. The hearings, the headlines, the scrutiny I'd spent my life avoiding. But I thought of Harper suspended and waiting for someone to believe her. I thought of my team, their names still hidden behind redacted lines. "I understand," I said. My voice was steady. He pressed stop on the recorder. The red light went dark. In the silence, I felt something like relief. When I stepped out of the building, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, almost sweet. I walked across the lot, my uniform bag slung over my shoulder. Every step felt deliberate, like I was moving towards something I couldn't quite name. At my car, I paused, resting my hand on the door handle. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Harper. "Call me when you can." I closed my eyes, feeling a pull in my chest. For so long, we'd been strangers under the same roof. Maybe this was our chance to change that. I got in and started the engine. The sky was clearing, thin sunlight breaking through the clouds. I took a slow breath. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally coming home. Driving back, I thought about the committee hearing, how it would feel to stand in that chamber and say out loud what we'd all been ordered to forget. I gripped the wheel tighter. The road blurred at the edges, memories rising like ghosts I couldn't shake. 12 days in that ruined schoolhouse. My teammate's hand in mine as we waited for extraction. The radio crackling with a voice that never made it into any report. I blinked hard, pulling myself back to the present. The asphalt, the painted lines, the way the sun touched the tops of the trees. I wasn't that girl in the shadows anymore. My phone rang, breaking the quiet. Harper's name glowed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey," I said softly, "I'm on my way." Harper's voice came through the lines, small but steady. "Can you come over?" she asked. I don't want to be alone tonight." I felt something loosen in my chest. For years we'd been polite strangers, careful not to touch old wounds. "I'm coming," I said. The line clicked off. I drove the rest of the way with the windows down, letting the cool air clear the last of the tension from my mind. When I pulled up to her building, she was already at the door, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding something in. I climbed the steps slowly. For once, I didn't feel like an intruder. When I reached her, she looked up, eyes red but clear. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. Inside, the apartment was quiet. The papers were gone, replaced by 2 mugs of tea on the kitchen table. We sat without speaking at first, just the soft clink of ceramic and the steady rhythm of our breathing. Harper traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about any of it." "I know," I said. My voice came out gentler than I expected. She looked up, eyes bright with questions she didn't know how to ask. "Were you scared?" she whispered. I thought of the dark hallways, the gunfire, the moments I wasn't sure I'd see morning. "Sometimes," I said. "But I wasn't alone." She nodded like that was the part she needed to hear most. Harper set her cup down and leaned back, studying me like she was trying to fit all the pieces together. "All those years," she said quietly, "I thought you left because you couldn't handle it, because you failed." I looked down at my hands, the faint scars along my knuckles. "That's what they wanted everyone to believe," I said. "It was easier than telling the truth." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for how I judged you." I shook my head. You didn't know. None of you did. The silence between us felt different this time. Not heavy, just honest. She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip warm and steady. We know now, she said. And that has to matter. We sat there holding hands until the tea went cold. For the first time, I felt like we were really sisters, not rivals or strangers, or shadows of what we should have been. I don't know what will happen after the hearing, I said. My voice was low. They could spin it any way they want. Harper squeezed my hand. Then we tell the truth anyway. I looked at her, the determination in her eyes so familiar, it almost hurt. That's why you opened those files, I said. You were trying to give us back our story. She nodded. Someone had to. I drew a slow breath, feeling something settle in my chest. Then we'll do it together, I said. And for the first time, I believed it. The next morning, I dressed in my uniform for the first time in 15 years. The fabric felt stiff against my skin, heavy with everything it represented. Harper stood in the doorway watching. She didn't say anything, but her eyes shone with something close to pride. I smoothed the front of the jacket, my hands steady. You look like yourself, she said softly. I met her gaze in the mirror. I feel like myself. We drove to the Pentagon in silence, the city waking up around us. When we pulled into the lot, she reached over and touched my arm. Whatever happens, she whispered, you're not alone anymore. I nodded, my throat tight. Together we stepped into the building, ready to face whatever waited inside. The hearing room was colder than I expected. Rows of seats filled with officials, aides, and observers who would dissect every word I spoke. I sat at the table, my uniform crisp under the fluorescent lights. Harper took a seat behind me, her presence a steady weight at my back. A woman in a gray suit called the session to order. The gavel struck once sharp and final. Commander, she began. You understand, this testimony will be entered into the permanent record. I lifted my chin. I do. I could feel Harper's eyes on me. I thought of my team, the ones who'd never get to stand here. I took a slow breath. This is the truth, I said. My voice didn't shake. All of it. And the room fell silent, waiting. I began at the beginning. The day I was recruited, the day I signed the papers that erased my name. I described the training, the missions, the nights we spent in places that don't appear on any map. No one interrupted. Every face was turned toward me, some skeptical, some solemn. When I spoke about the schoolhouse, the 12 days of holding that ground, I saw Harper wipe her eyes. I kept my voice calm, steady, not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I needed them to hear me without distraction. This wasn't about glory, I said. It was about doing what no one else would. I paused, letting the weight of it settle over the room. We were never supposed to be remembered, but we were there. One of the committee members leaned forward, studying the files spread before him. Commander, you're asking us to overturn years of classified silence, he said. Why now? I met his gaze without blinking. Because the lie costs more than the truth, I said simply. He looked away as if he couldn't hold my eyes. I thought of the women who'd stood beside me, their names erased, their courage hidden. I'm not here for recognition, I continued. I'm here so no one can pretend we didn't exist. Behind me, Harper let out a shaky breath. In that moment, I felt something shift in the room, like the first crack in a wall that had stood too long. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a start. The questions kept coming, each one trying to poke holes in what I'd lived. Dates, coordinates, names I could only partially reveal. I answered every one, my voice low but unwavering. At some point, I stopped feeling afraid. The truth had weight, but it also had its own kind of freedom. When I finished, the room was silent. No one moved. I looked down at my hands, the uniform sleeves neat against my wrists. For so long, I'd wondered if this day would ever come. I lifted my head to face the committee. Whatever you decide, I said quietly, I'm not ashamed of what we did. And for the first time, I knew I never had to be. The chairwoman cleared her throat, her expression softer than before. Thank you, Commander, she said. Your testimony will be considered in our final review. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline drain from my body all at once. Harper rose from her seat behind me. She walked to my side and rested a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. For a moment, the rest of the room faded. It was just the two of us, no ranks or secrets between us anymore. As we turned to leave, I caught the eyes of one of the younger aides. She didn't look away. Instead, she gave me the smallest nod. Outside the chamber doors, I let out a breath I'd been holding for 15 years. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd finally spoken. We stepped into the hallway, the heavy doors closing behind us with a soft click. I leaned against the cool wall, my heart still thudding in my chest. Harper stood in front of me, studying my face. "You did it?" she said, her voice quiet but certain. I managed a tired smile. "We did." She reached for my hand, and I let her take it without hesitation. For so long, I'd believed no one would ever stand beside me in the light. But here she was. I straightened, feeling lighter than I could remember. "Come on," I said. "Let's go home." And as we walked down that long corridor together, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. Outside, the sky was a clear, bright blue. The air smelled fresh, like rain had finally washed everything clean. We stood on the steps for a moment, neither of us speaking, just breathing. Harper slipped her arm through mine. It felt natural, like all the years between us had folded away. "Do you think they'll believe you?" she asked. I looked out over the parking lot, watching the flags ripple in the breeze. "They don't have to believe everything I said softly, just enough to let the truth stand." She nodded her head, resting against my shoulder. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "I'm proud of you." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle in the space I'd kept empty for so long. They felt like healing. We walked to the car in silence, the sun warm on our backs. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was leaving something unfinished behind. When I opened the door, Harper paused, her hand on the roof. "Are you going to stay a while?" she asked. I looked at her, at the hope in her eyes. "I think I will," I said. A slow smile spread across her face. It reminded me of when we were girls before everything got so complicated. As I started the engine, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "No more disappearing," she whispered. I nodded, feeling the promise settle deep in my chest. "No more," I said. And for once, I meant every word. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the old heavy silence. This felt different, lighter, like a burden had finally been set down. We passed familiar streets, places that used to make me feel like a stranger. Now they looked almost welcoming. At a red light, Harper turned to me. "What will you do next?" she asked. I thought about it. About the years I'd spent hiding. About the voices that still needed to be heard. "I think I'm going to tell the rest of the story," I said. Her smile was soft, proud. "People need to hear it." The light turned green. I pressed the gas, feeling something open in my chest. Maybe this was what it felt like to come home for real. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always had, but somehow it didn't feel so cold anymore. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. Harper reached for the door handle, then stopped. "They're going to ask questions," she said. "About you, about everything." I nodded. "Let them." She searched my face like she was making sure I meant it. "You're not afraid?" I took a slow breath. "I'm tired of being afraid," I said. She smiled, then the kind of smile that said she understood. Together we stepped out of the car, ready to face whatever waited behind that front door. Inside the house was quiet. My father looked up from the kitchen table, surprise flickering across his face. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he set down his coffee and stood. "Welcome home," he said, voice rough at the edges. I felt something shift in my chest, something I hadn't let myself hope for. Harper slipped past me and started unpacking bags like it was the most natural thing in the world. My mother appeared in the doorway, her expression uncertain. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "It's good to see you," she said finally. I swallowed hard, feeling tears press behind my eyes. "It's good to be seen," I whispered. And in that quiet kitchen, I knew the real victory wasn't recognition. It was being here finally as myself. If any part of this story feels like your own, if you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments below. Your voice matters here. And if you'd like to follow more stories that honor unseen courage and quiet victories, consider subscribing to this channel. Sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we take together.